is just to welcome everybody to this webinar on Africa's innovation and industrialization strategy post-COVID recovery. And I have assumed over the last several webinars that everybody knows Africarix and Groberix. So for the purpose of the new participants who don't know Africarix and Groberix, I would just want to highlight who we are. I know KJ is going to talk about Groberix, but basically, for the sake of the new people who have been interested in understanding what we are doing as a network, I would want to let them know that Groberix stands for Global Network on the Economics of Learning, Innovation, and Competence Building Systems. I don't want to say much more than that because I know Professor KJ is going to talk about that. But Africarix is the African chapter of Groberix. And basically, this is a network of scholars who are working on innovation and competence building and how that can be harnessed for Africa's development. Africarix as a network was launched in March in 2012 in Dar es Salaam. And its main, basically the vision is to facilitate the production and the use of high quality research on innovation and development to promote inclusive and sustainable development within the African countries. So as a network, we are hosted by African Center for Technology Studies, which is based in Nairobi. But just coming back to our topic today, we as a network, we have over the years been pursuing the industrialization agenda as a research theme within Africarix. And if I go back to when the network was launched in 2012, those the key research themes that have informed the priority agenda for the network have taken into consideration the innovation and industrialization agenda more generally. And taking some of the thematic areas around this particular topic, you can see that innovation in manufacturing and service activities and how they contribute to the transformation of African agriculture was one of the research agenda that was discussed then. And the other agenda is the standing of innovation in industrial complexes and how agency and policies can help foster such complexes was another research agenda. Another one was combined research on inclusive development and the understanding that industrialization remains vital to Africa's development. And I'm sure that is going to be focused on during the discussion. And I want to say that, basically, you can see that this particular topic is pertinent to Africa and Africarix research agenda. But just coming back to the speakers, the team that is going to help us to discuss this particular topic, I want to mention that we are very appreciative of the team that we are having today. And this is a team that has remained committed to Africarix over the years since the first interim scientific board was constituted in 2012. That particular team had the three speakers of today. Professor Baji was actually one of the first members who was behind the defining of the research agenda for the network. And he continues to support the network and the Groberix network in terms of building the research capacity building agenda within Africa, with the aim of promoting Africa's development. I don't think I can talk about his CV. All of you have seen it in the advert. I cannot talk about it. You can check there. He has a wealth of knowledge in this particular topic. Professor KJ Joseph, who is going to introduce himself in a minute. Again, he has also been very instrumental in supporting the activity of of Africa Leagues as the mother network, because he has been guiding us as a network and the father of in what we have been doing. Professor Erika Buddha, again, also a very, very key scholar in this particular topic. He being in Globerics in the board as well as Africa Leagues. We are very, very excited to have all of you to get today to support in the discussion that we are going to be having. And of course, not forgetting the participants. We are very, very much excited to have new and old scholars within Africa Leagues. And we welcome all of you because as a team, together with the speakers, we believe that's the reason why this particular webinar is going to become a success. So without much ado, I'm Anne Kingiri. I'm from the Africa League Secretariat in Nairobi, and I want to hand over this particular the moderation to Professor Erika Buddha to take us over from here. Thank you very, very much. Over to you, Erika.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that introduction. I think since we are running a little bit with a delay, and I would like to just welcome everybody again and just give the floor to Prof. KJ Joseph, who is going to set the scene and give some remarks from the Global Leagues presidency.
Thank you, Erika. Thank you, Anne Kingiri. First of all, greetings from Global Leagues to all our dear friends over in Africa Leagues. And of course, greetings from India. You know that we have a very long and warm relationship between India and Africa. I don't want to elaborate on that. As Anne Kingiri said, Global Leagues, I'm not going to elaborate so much on Global Leagues because in the world of Google, there is no need to give much information. But nonetheless, this global network on the economics of learning, innovation, and competence building systems, it is now almost getting a 20-year-old network, almost 2003 it was established. And now it has got chapters all across the world. We have got in Asia, the first regional chapter was established in 2004 in Asia, called Asia Leagues. Then we have got Africa Leagues, which is organizing this meeting today. Then we have Latin America and America, we have got LALIX. For Europe, there is EuroLeagues. And of course, in India and China, we have got India Leagues, and China, there is SICA Leagues. And I am very happy to note that among these very vibrant regional networks, if at all I am going to evaluate, I must say the most vibrant is Africa Leagues, thanks to the vibrant leadership of Anne Kingiri, Professor Bettina, Becky, and others. And they do, I must say that for Global Leagues, right from the beginning, there is always saying that Africa first, and we mean that. And now we are very happy to note that Africa Leagues is in fact the first and the best performer among the regional networks. And I congratulate the organizers. And I know this is the 6th of the series of the lectures which they're organizing. And I must say that Professor Banji, is our great, we have a long association. In fact, I was telling that we are meeting at a long time, but it's a great opportunity. I know his work from Uni Merit onwards. And the topic that is selected and the speaker selected for addressing the issue could not have been better. That is all what I want to say about the topic. And as all of you are aware, as a student of economics, when many of the countries got their political independence after the Second World War, there was a general consensus among the development economists. You know that the economists, rarely there is any consensus. One consensus which we could find was that the road to development is nothing but industrialization. Hirschman or Lewis or Nicholas Calder or all. And the dictum was either industrialize or perish. And in fact, one of the papers by Professor Banji's colleague Adam Surmai shown that in 1950, the share of manufacturing output of 29 largest developing countries was something like 11%. And at that time, in 1950, and at that time, the share of 16 largest developed countries was 31%. By 1980, the developing countries increased their share from 11% in 1950 to 20% in 1980. And after 1980, you all know that there is a major change of heart in the policy makers, and the world became very different. And today what we discuss about is what is called deindustrialization. With respect to India or in Latin America or in some of the Asian countries, we talk about premature deindustrialization, a process wherein the share of manufacturing output declines at a much lower rate, lower level of per capita income at which the developed countries witnessed declining share of manufacturing. Trajana, one of the Cambridge, she would argue that in case of Africa, we have even per capita income not reaching $1,000, the share of manufacturing is declining. That means we have got deindustrialization without industrialization. And I think it is in this context, I must say that, Danny Roderick and others articulate this issue. I'm sure it is in this context that the issue of industrialization, the post-COVID, I know that I don't want to elaborate about the post-COVID situation and the relevance of manufacturing. At least I can say that COVID has taught us two lessons. One, you cannot leave things to market. Secondly, it's equally important that self-reliance is no more a dejected term. There is the reason, and I would say that this is the time for us to think ahead and what is the way forward. And I once again congratulate the Africanics colleagues for organizing this webinar and inviting me to be with you. I'm very much thankful for that. And I also look forward to listening to Professor Banji. Over to you, Professor Erika.
Well, thank you so much, Prof. Joseph, for those initial remarks. So we are now moving to the core of this session, which is the presentation that we are looking for by Prof. Oyelarano Yeyinka. So he's going to be talking about industrialization and innovation strategy post-COVID. He has been introduced already, but just for those, you can see there in his first slide his affiliation. He's a senior special advisor to the president on industrialization at the African Development Bank. Prof. Banji has actually had a long trajectory in academia before joining the African Development Bank, and he in fact has produced some of the most highly cited contributions to the field of innovation and development in Africa, and essentially has shaped the field in which we're working on in our continent. So he's very excellently well positioned to give these academic insights into the practicalities of what it would take for our African continent to engage in this path of recovery and reconstruction following the crisis that we are experiencing currently and the COVID. So I'm really looking forward to the presentation. We'll have about 40 minutes presentation by Prof. Oyeyinka, and then we'll have about 30 minutes discussion in plenary. You are encouraged to write your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll try and revisit some of that during the Q&A session. So, Banji, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, KJ, and all the organizers for inviting me. I thank ACTS for support to Africa Leaks for hosting this important with my very good late friend, Callistus Juma, in 1989, was formed in his living room in Nairobi. Callistus and I had the same supervisor at the Science Policy Research Unit. We finished the same, and then went on to form ACTS, which has become a very important institution in Africa today. So this is very enduring legacy for him, and we remember him next today. One is to say that I'm very close connection between industrialization and innovation. You can go to the next slide. And to say that all innovators, all countries that have become dynamic innovators, industrializers. You cannot become a strong innovating country without having acquired a strong industrial capacity. That's the first point. There is no country in the world since the 1700s that had progress, economic progress, without having industrialized. In fact, the 2008 miracle report that the World Bank did cited only 13 countries that were growing at a only 2 of them industrialized. Classes. There are 3 sectoral
Erika, I think you need to do something because we can't hear Professor Bandi.
Yes, I'm realizing that we are having some connection issues. So it seems like the speaker may have a bad internet connection. Let's try and contact him directly.
I think he's just come back into the room.
Okay, so he was, is he connected again? Let's see, I can't see him.
Prof. Oyinka, are you there?
I don't see him connected. Does the Secretariat perhaps have another way of contacting him? Through his, can he be called to see if he's got any other connection that he can use?
We are currently trying to call him, reach him by phone. So if people can just give us a couple of minutes, apologies for the interruption.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any news about the speaker so far?
No, we don't have, not yet, yes, but the assistant is with us here. She's trying to get hold of him.
Okay. Okay, so let's ask everybody to have to give us a few more minutes while we try and resolve the issue.
In the meantime, if you would like to post any questions or issues that you think it would be useful to raise during the discussion, please post them in the chat. Okay, I'm told that Prof. Oyinka is trying to reconnect using his phone, so I'm hoping that we can get back online very shortly.
Prof, are you connected? I saw that he was aiming to connect. I see him in the list of participants.
The assistant is trying to help us. Abike, he is the personal assistant, and he's online. She's online. She's online. She is a she.
Anna, hello.
Yes.
Hi, this is
What one could do
I
is
think
Banji
he's
could
trying to
speak
dial
through his
back.
mobile, and you capture it in your mobile and put a speakerphone and keep to the mic of the audio of your.
Yeah, okay. Are you getting it now?
We can hear you a little bit far away, but we can hear something. Let's see. Prof, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hello.
Very good.
Great to have you back.
Yeah.
We can hear you now.
Okay, now I think I'm back now. All right.
Excellent.
So this is the problem of technological capacity. Yeah? All right. All right. So we were at the point of the first point about somebody should mute. So I made a point that industrial manufacturing is the basis for innovation, and that there are 4 components that I like to emphasize. Without industrial capacity, manufacturing capacity, most countries are unable to make their own, develop their own infrastructure capacity, which is extremely important for both innovation and industrialization. The second point is that, in fact, to transform from subsistence agriculture, in which many of African countries are trapped, they need to develop their manufacturing capacity, which is really where a number of African countries still remain very primitive in their practices of agriculture. The third point is that a strong industrial manufacturing capacity generates technological innovations. And this is really the point about the sequencing. First, you have to have a strong capacity for industry, to learn to produce, to learn to maintain, and then to learn to innovate, both minor and major innovations. And the fourth point here under this is the capacity to transform even your services. Without it, many countries in Africa, their services sector has remained very rudimentary. It's basically low productivity services where they are in. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, if you look at these very important innovations, much of which happened in the 1800s, and the people here who are familiar with agriculture and mechanical industries will know. You find, for example, that the irrigation was one of the first such innovation thousands of years ago. Chemical industry, based on the work of German scientists in the 1840s. Plant breeding, as you know, Gregory Mendel's work, and the principles were enunciated in the 1860s. Wheat and rice from Japanese dwarfing cereals in the 1880s. Hybrid corn, of course, a very popular subject in innovation studies, were all hundreds of years ago. But they were products of industrial societies that actually gained capacity to innovate. But first of all, they had to become industrial societies. And this is why, for the most part, development and industry is always taken in the same phrase. We always talk about advanced industrial countries. Without the industrial, you are not advanced. And in the next slide, I showed the 10 top exporters of manufacturers. You can go to the next slide. Either they are chemicals, whether they are pharmaceuticals, whether they are foods. The same set of countries are present in this group, the EU, the United States. For example, you find that the United States is the biggest exporter of grain, soybeans, grain, all of those things that make life very easy to transform the lives of poor countries. All the contests you find today between China and the United States and all is usually about those things. In 2019, the Netherlands exported 95 billion euros of food products, a country of 17 million people with very small land mass. Africa has 60% of all the total arable land in the world, yet it cannot feed itself. In 2018, we imported food close to $60 billion. So without gaining industrial capacity by which you innovate, poverty will remain a big problem. Next slide. And in the next slide, I showed that the most innovative economies in the world are also the one you describe as the most advanced industrial countries. So there is a synergy between developing your capacity to industrialize first and then to innovate, Whether you innovate at the minor level or major level, you must develop industrial capacity. And this is what KJ was referring to earlier. This is what COVID has exposed to us. We got to a point in March of 2020 where even when you have your own money, you can't get drugs, you can't get food. Africa was at the last level or at the very last end of the queue of global supply chain. Whether we had money or not, you couldn't buy. So the point of actually becoming self-sufficient in certain key items, your food, your drugs, your medicine, and so forth, is a point that this COVID has exposed Africa to. And it's not a slogan. We are the bank, as Africa Development Bank, are saying why Africa must industrialize. Simply meaning you must modernize your economies. You must produce certain things, you must add value to your products. Now, in the next slide, in structural transformation, is also, again, underpinned by continuing innovation. And what is structural transformation? Basically moving labor from low productivity activities to higher productivity activities, whether it's agriculture, to manufacturing, to services. A lot of people now say, oh, Africa just simply should leapfrog and begin to do services. Yes, but you continue to buy iPhone, you continue to buy iPad, you continue to buy computers from other people if you have the money. If you don't, you remain underdeveloped. In other words, there is a point at which you must gain some basic industrial capacity. And economic diversification means a shift into many other sectors, not just oil, not just minerals. It involves new innovative products. It involves new markets. In fact, this is the classic definition, the Schumpeterian classic definition of innovation: the creation of new products, new processes, new markets, new organizations, and new institutions that make life easy for people. Next slide. Now, another indication of development and industrialization is that the share of agricultural employment continues to decline in GDP. When you see all those countries that have made a huge progress to build their industrial capacity, what you find in China, South Korea, and all of those countries that made progress in the 70s is that they need less people to cultivate the land. And those surplus labor move into agriculture, into industry, the classic Arthur Lewis thesis. But you find that in the poorer countries, Zambia, DRC, Nigeria, all of those countries that had dependent too long on exports of raw materials, exports of oil, exports of minerals, life remains the same. The fact that, for example, the projection we have from the bank and also the World Bank is that 50% of the poorest of the poor will be in just three countries in Africa by 2030, DRC, Nigeria, Ethiopia, if the same scenario of development or growth continues. And so when you industrialize, you also find, next slide, the manufacturing share of employment also rises while agriculture drops. So where are we? And you find that for the most part, countries that have succeeded have achieved at least between 25 to 30% of manufacturing contribution to GDP over time. For the most part, in the poorer countries, the minerals, raw material exporting countries, they are less than 10%. India has made huge progress, but India also got into the trap of services. And you find that manufacturing in India is, I think, about 19%. So there is also all those flip side of development. Many of African countries today, the biggest contribution is services. But what kind of services? You are not talking of Boston 128 or Route 128. You are not talking of Silicon Valley. You are talking of people making very basic stuff. Hotel services, transportation, low-level logistics. That is not the kind of services that we want to see in 2030, for example. So we arrive at three industrialization trajectories. Number one are those countries that managed to move labor successfully from agriculture to manufacturing to services. In those countries, contribution to agriculture went down, manufacturing went up, then they began to innovate, innovative products across sectors. you look at the countries where vaccine is produced today, they are the same countries we describe as advanced industrial nations. They didn't just wake up to make vaccines. Vaccines built on progress that had been made over the last 50 years. Pfizer, for example, was the one that adopted penicillin. And the capacity they built up over time was what enabled them to be able to produce this vaccine at such a fast rate. It's almost akin to a miracle. Usually vaccines will take you through 3-4 years to make. You find recent that we are now having a vaccine for HIV and malaria. My own supposition is that these are built on the new molecular biologies that we are finding given this COVID advance. Now, so you find those countries, then you find those countries that managed to move successfully for some time, then they got stopped. So many of those countries are what's called stalled industrialization. They are stalled, includes many countries in Africa. Then there are those who actually move backward. They began to industrialize, then they began to prematurely de-industrialize, including South Africa, Nigeria, the two biggest countries in the region. They were overtaken by services, they were overtaken by all kinds of other economic problems. And what we find now with COVID is that a lot of these countries are caught in the debt trap, huge debt trap. And these are the things we need to solve beyond COVID now, if these countries will have to recover stronger and build better. Next slide. And two main reasons we find is low technological progress, lack of innovation, lack of industrialization, and commodity dependence through international trade. When you look at in the last 1 month, for example, we are beginning to have another, commodity, what we call commodity super cycles. You find countries beginning to, you find all the commodities prices going up again. Oil has gone up to $70 yesterday. You find a lot of the major minerals going up. And then these countries get caught up in this euphoria. They began to export, make money from it, but don't depend on that. This is the message we are sending. You have to use those kinds of revenues to build infrastructure, to make progress in other areas, human capital, for example. Next slide. So what has happened with those countries that had lacked progress and also have relied mostly on commodity dependency is exactly what we said earlier. A large majority of their people still are stuck in agriculture. Many of them have relied on mining, and the quantity of labor rather than the quality of labor has been their own comparative advantage. These countries include Botswana, Zambia, Nigeria, and there are those who have been disindustrializing: South Africa, Morocco, Egypt. I'm not going to go into too much, but let me give an example of why we need to pivot away. Next slide. The example of cocoa production in the world. Now, there are studies in the Africa Development Bank, for example, on the natural capital of Africa. When you look at a country like DRC, the natural capital is, according to estimates, conservative estimates, up to $34 trillion. But these minerals are under the ground. These minerals are subject to conflict. In fact, they call them conflict minerals. Others come, they take these minerals away. Much of what you find for the new electric cars, like lithium battery, like for iPhones, many of them are dug out from many of our countries, particularly DRC. But when you look at the percentage of the value gained by these countries, less than 5%. Much of the value goes to those who add value to these countries. And same with a product like cocoa. Cocoa is instructive because it's been a long-time issue. From 1960, look at this graph. Between Ivory Coast and Ghana, they produce 70% of global cocoa. And what these countries have succeeded in doing is simply exporting their jobs to those who are adding value. In 2018, chocolate industry employed over 70,000 people in the EU and the US alone. The global market for cocoa was valued at $106 billion and is projected to be $147 billion by 2050. But Africa's share of that is only about 3%. So $100 billion industry, and Africa's share is only $6 billion. Yes, they produce $70 billion. So you see the point about industrialization, the point about adding value to what you produce. Without it, poverty surely will remain. So what should we do? Next slide. What should Africa begin to do? Just a summary. One, economic diversification. It's not a slogan. This has been said many times, but we are hoping that countries and leaders will take this extremely seriously. Oil and minerals will help you in the short term, will help you with some fiscal challenge, but it cannot sustain you in the long term. So a country has to, and what does diversification do? It helps us to meet the goal of job creation and improvement in income distribution. What you find is that many of the minerals and oil economies are enclaves. They don't help you to create jobs on a large and wider scale throughout the economies. And also, it reduces export revenue instability and volatilities. These are usually growth inhibiting. They disrupt the planning of countries. So without diversification through industrialization, the long-term development prospects of many countries are bleak. This is the conclusion that has been made by many countries, by many studies. And I think COVID is telling us that we need to take this extremely seriously. The second point, next slide, is to move away from static to dynamic comparative advantage. States, African states need to formulate long-term vision and goals and pursue them. We are not lacking for big ideas. Agenda 2063, the African Development Bank High Five, but these require long-term, very persistent, very persevering effort. Countries have to do this in the long term. And we find that all the countries that have made progress, the technology vision, we saw in a book by Christopher Freeman, Economic Development and Technology Policy and Economic Progress. These were the central ideas of this country. You have to formulate a vision and stick with those plans. Number two is that capital formation to create markets and priorities, to use technological advance to build horizontal linkages across economies. These are what enable sectors to have intersectoral spillovers. If you just rely on this vertical relationship where you simply export and get cheap income, you are not learning. You know, economies grow through learning, through production, through maintenance, through making your own mistakes. One of the things that we are doing at the bank now is building what we call special agro-industrial processing zones, which is mostly end-to-end supply chain within countries. And we are doing that now in about 8 to 10 countries. Next slide. The last point that I would like to make is that leaders have to make a bold industrial choice. And I cite the case of India in 1970. India made that bold choice of denying product patent protection to promote its own local pharmaceutical sector. KJ and I were talking about this early today. Bangladesh did the same thing. They simply imitated India in 1986. Today, both Bangladesh, which is poorer than some countries in Africa, produce 90% of its own domestic medicine. India pharma in 2006, 2007 was estimated at $12 billion. Today, it's worth close to $55 to $70 billion, depending on what kind of scenario that you are looking at. India pharma supplies over 50% of global demand for various vaccines, 40% of generic demand for US, and 25% of world medicine for UK. India contributes the second largest share of pharmaceutical biotech workforce in the whole world. Forget about the problem that India is going through now. I believe they will get through it. But the point is that they've made a choice in the particular sector and also the agricultural sector. In 1964, India rejected donation of wheat from America and simply decided to import seeds, wheat seeds and seedlings, rather than get donation from America due to geopolitical issues. Within 3 years, India was self-sufficient in wheat. These are not rocket science. And this, I believe, I'm calling on African countries to make a bold choice. Bold choices involve pain sometimes. You have to break some relationship. But if we don't do this, we are not going to feed our people. We are not going to get the drugs we want. We are going to be talking about this in 2030, 2040. So my point is, industrialization and innovation must go hand in hand, where these economies must build their industrial capacity in a deliberate and explicit way, without worrying about what others have to do. And the next slide shows the reward of bold decisions. In 1947, India was looking for donation from Canada. In 2021, you see the picture here. Prime Minister Modi was assuring Canadian President Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, that they are going to facilitate COVID-19 vaccines to Canada. This is the testimony of India's progress over those times. This is the testimony of countries that take bold decisions, not just India, China, Vietnam. Today, people talk about comparative advantage, but how come Vietnam is, again, just sitting beside China, but they are making incredible industrial progress? Some will tell you, oh, you don't have comparative advantage, you don't have this and that. I think countries just need to make their own decisions. And the last point I would like to make is that we should renew focus on academic excellence in Africa. Because at the end of it all, human capital is at the basis of all that we have to do. We have to put human excellence at the base of everything. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prof. Yinka, for a great presentation. It was definitely not substantially affected by the technical glitch. I think we've recovered massively well, and it's been a great, very stimulating presentation. There are a number of questions that have been posted in the chat, and we will try to get through some of those. I think just as an attempt to summarize a little bit the points that you've made. You've really reminded us of how important industrialization is for Africa to fulfill not only the need for economic diversification, but also to fulfill its most basic needs. Really, for you mentioned food production as an example. If we want to avoid to get stuck into a low growth path, you really warned us about the importance of making tough choices. You've given the example of India, but I'm sure there are others that we can also take inspiration from. And in that statement, you have hinted at the importance of policy, the role of the states, really, and in driving and shaping these opportunities in the global landscape. And you've also, in your last slide, you've sent it back to us, to the research community and the scientists, to really strive for excellence, but also it comes with some policy implications in terms of how do we make sure that we support science and technology and academic excellence in a way that it fits into this larger sort of industrialization aspiration of the continent. I would maybe like to bring it back to the questions that have been posted in the chat. Very interesting questions. Would it be okay, Prof, if we send you, if we give sort of post 2 or 3 questions at once, and then you can.
Yeah.
Would that work?
Yeah, just read them to me, and I'll try to.
Okay.
Because I'm using my phone now. Yeah.
Okay. Great. There's one question about trade and about the. Speaking about institutional frameworks that would assist the innovation and industrialization. The African Free Trade Continental Agreement is been mentioned as perhaps an avenue or to increase the impact of industrialization and innovation and so on. Do you think there's going to be an impact, a positive impact from such agreement in place? So that is number one. Maybe the second one, is more of a comment, perhaps of a question. There were some ideas linked to linking tourism and agriculture. I read it as you know, as we see the boundaries between agriculture, industry, and services perhaps blurring in some cases. We see the servitization of manufacturing. We see agriculture becoming much more automatized and so on. So, do these conceptual boundaries between agriculture, manufacturing, and services still make sense? Is it something that we should be looking at from the continent, looking at the way forward in industrialization? And the third question that I will pose is about fiscal returns from commodity trade. The person posing the question indicated that they seems to be inhibiting Africa's industrialization, fiscal returns from commodity trade. What policy actions can help change this narrative or scenario? So let's start with the two questions first.
Okay, no, thanks, Erica. The first one, of course, is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that started in January this year. As a matter of fact, I think that if we take it serious, it's going to be a game changer for development for Africa. There was a World Bank report last year that was very clear, and the World Bank is always not known for promoting industrialization. They estimated that manufacturing export will gain the most, with intra-African manufacturing increasing by 110%, and the manufacturing export to the rest of the world will rise by 46%. So therefore, to effect trade in a meaningful way, and the program that we're actually developing within the African Development Bank also is that we shouldn't see the AFCFTA just simply as a trade instrument or a trade institution. It should be made, it should be configured in a way that this creates for us manufacturing hubs all over Africa. This is the only way in which you're going to get, not just a place for others to come and locate their factories, but for us to promote small, medium enterprises. Because by this now, we can trade among ourselves, learn over time among ourselves. All of you here are students of innovation. One of the key problems of competitiveness is that you are not able to export to those advanced industrial nations because of the quality requirements. But now, when the tariffs are removed and the borders are, the barriers are taken away, you're able to export among yourselves manufactured goods. You know, we cannot continue exporting raw material goods among ourselves. So through that, people estimate that in the next 10, 20 years, we can begin to do that learning among ourselves. Right now, the region's GDP is what, about 3 trillion, 1.3 trillion people. That can be doubled in the next 10 years, according to many people. I mean, the overall GDP, if we actually gain that manufacturing advantage among us. So I think the free trade area is a game changer for Africa. We are hoping that countries will quickly effect all the instruments that have been stipulated. Number two is that the blurring of the boundaries between agriculture, services, and industry. Yes, if you look at the productivity figures, for example, for the most so-called advanced industrial countries, the productivity in agriculture and industry and manufacturing is actually almost the same. That makes the point I was making earlier, that when you learn over a long period of time, because really, you look at all those countries, they are the biggest users of chemicals, fertilizers, all manner of tractors, machinery, equipment. Those are what make modern agriculture thrive. Unlike many of the poorer countries where people are still using hoe and cutlass, they are still, you know. And in the science area, you know, varieties of seed. I give you an example. One of the programs that the African Development Bank is doing in Sudan and Ethiopia is called TAT, Technology for African Agricultural Transformation. Is the improvement of heat-resistant seed for very dry areas. In Sudan, where they were growing only cotton because of heat, in the last 2 years, 2019, 2020, they were able to grow 800,000 acres, 800,000 acres of wheat. So Sudan, as we speak, is more than 50% self-sufficient in wheat. They used to import everything. Same with Ethiopia. And so this program now we are trying to take to almost all African countries. In fact, there was a program on Feed Africa last week where the President of the African Development Bank, President of IFAD, and 21 heads of state were present. And they all made pledges totaling 17 billion to actually raise these technologies uptakes to a higher level and spread it all across the African continent. This is the kind of leadership we want to ensure that by 2030, Africa is not importing food. Once you get beyond that, you begin to remove poverty from the land. You get to a point where food is the cheapest thing that you can find in the market. And the last point about trade, commodity trade. The danger about trade, and let me explain it in innovation terms that you guys are very much used to. You know, the danger, in fact, for me, the greater danger actually is that when you simply export, you are not learning to convert. You are not learning to industrialize. You are not learning to innovate. Imagine 50 pilots started the same day to learn to fly an aircraft, or 50 doctors. They're all in the same class. And one of them, after graduation, all he did is, he's selling kits made of pilot kits. He's selling dresses for pilots. Or the doctor is selling medicine. He doesn't practice medicine. In 20 years, his class may become neurosurgeons, they become whatever it is. To catch up is almost impossible. So you have to practice, you have to learn, you have to make your mistakes. So this is the same analogy. It's a marathon. Technological acquisition is a marathon. To get to a point where you are innovating at the speed of light, and I predict that after COVID-19, the acceleration of technological change is going to speed up because of what they call the new biology that you guys are looking at. The new biology blurs the space between the biology, between IT, between AI, the fourth industrial revolution aspects. So this is the point. If you have not been doing it, you have a big problem. If you are that pilot, for example, maybe you wake up and maybe you are able to fly a helicopter. The other guy is already flying a fighter jet. That's, for me, the analogy that I can make. So selling things, it doesn't get you anywhere. And the commodity super cycles, they go and come. Look at all the cycles over the last 50 years. Actually, we did a study where we're looking at all of this since the 70s. Every time there is a crash in oil or minerals, all these African countries are set back 5, 10, 15 years, depending on the commodity they are looking at. And one of these days, I'm going to share that study with some of you. You are just set back with COVID. I'm sure many countries may not recover 10 years. You remember in 2016, a lot of these African countries experienced the same thing. So in 5 years, you have these very big crashes. And COVID includes health. So the health fragility was exposed. The health infrastructure was totally, set at risk. Thank God we didn't have the prevalence of this COVID in Africa as with other places. It would have been a disaster. And it's still a disaster. One life lost still not acceptable. So I think the idea of commodity trade should be retaught by African countries. You need to add value. For example, in cocoa or cashew, if you export cashew, 3/4 of cashew is actually rubbish. You just take it to Vietnam. And that's what they are doing. I had a big discussion with the biggest exporter of cashew and cocoa from Nigeria. And I sat him down, we're talking. He said, Prof, we want to add value. He said, if I take tons of cashew that I take to Vietnam, 3/4 of it are just cashew kernels. I ship it there. Much of it is moisture. So when it gets there, they only pay me for the cashew nut. Then they take the kernel, convert them to butter. They convert them to paint. All these other materials, ship it to the United States. So there is really no value in continuing with this kind of trade that we are doing. I think it's something that all of you, I want you to really push this message to all African countries. And this is why we are really saying now, look, COVID should be an inflection point. This has to stop. 50 years is enough for us to learn our lesson. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, for those answers and very important messages that you are sending to us, and also as we engage with policymakers, as researchers, as we engage with policymakers in our own context, we should keep those messages in mind. Let me carry on with some of the questions. The chat has been quite active here, so there's a few questions about policy incentives. There's a question on in a context where electricity is expensive, where taxes are high. What kind of incentives are needed to promote investment in innovation?
Right.
There's a question about leadership and especially the role that the executive and political leadership play in industrial and innovation policy. So the question is, what kind of leaders make bold decisions? Is a tough question. There's another question, and there's maybe just grouping them at three. There's a question about COVID-19 and the sort of the type of investments that have come into the continent to support COVID-19 impacts, and how can these investments be leveraged to address industrialization in the continent? Is there a way to ensure that, I mean, I think all African countries have experienced job losses, factories closing, and reduced investment in manufacturing firms. So is there a way of redirecting some of the support that is coming into the continent to address some of the social impacts of COVID to ensure that they contribute to the broader industrialization agenda? Let me stop there for now, and then we'll go to the next round.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Let me take those three very quickly. Policies on electricity taxes. Yes, this is a big challenge for many countries. They find themselves in this conundrum where they want to collect taxes, but they're not providing services. In fact, there was a lecture that Dr. Additional gave recently where he was talking about implicit taxation by many Africans. I don't know about many other countries, but in our country, Nigeria, you practically run your own local government. You provide your own water, you provide your own electricity. Everybody, businesses have alternative generating facilities. So it's implicit taxation is extremely high. And this is why it's always a concern, taxes, for example. So I empathize a lot with the question. What do we do? This is one of the reasons why we are trying to promote special economic zones. I'll give you an example. The special agro-industrial processing zone that I'm coordinating with other colleagues in about 9 countries now. Basically, what you do is to try to reduce this infrastructure deficit within a geographic zone. It's a typical special economic zone, right? Where you have the hub, the factories are located there. But in addition, and the unique thing about the special agro-industrial zone is that within 50, 70 kilometers radius of that hub, we also open up those spaces to the farming communities. So we go in there, open the roads, add, for example, we build what we call ATCs, Agri Transformation Centers. In other words, centers where, for example, you can have drying, warehousing, receiving facilities for poor farmers, and also training. There are also social services provided, clinics, schools. So this year, for example, we are doing Mozambique, Liberia. In fact, my colleague just came back from Liberia, Mozambique, Tanzania. In the case of Nigeria, we are doing about 6 states at the same time. IFAD is co-financing with $100 million. The bank is putting $150 million for this year. We have around $500 million over the next 2-3 years to build those zones. So that sort of take away the concern about the infrastructure deficit. We also build one-stop centers in those areas. So the idea of multiple taxation will be taken away. Basically, it has its own customs post and all that. I give you an example of one particular state. They've actually released almost 500 hectares of land. For those who are familiar with Nigeria, in the southwest of Nigeria, it's called Ogun State. It's right on the main express. So we hope before the end of this year, the construction is going to start. And we're doing that in 6 days. We plan to go over almost all the states, and so as we are doing also in the other countries in Africa. So these are some of the, I'm sure many of you are aware what Deng did in China in the 80s. This is really a sort of a modification of the special economic zones built all across coastal China in those days. In Korea, for example, you have almost 400 special agro zones in Korea. And you find that will also not look at short-term gains. One of the reasons for the dysfunction we find in many African countries is that people are politicians who come, they have 4 years, 5 years, and they are looking simply to just those 4 years. Industrialization and innovation, a framework, take a long time. Building university capacity takes a long time. Research capacity, you can't do it this year, not do it next year. So that's the kind of leadership we're hoping for in Africa. The last point about COVID investment, how do we redirect? Now, one of the studies, I'm sure if you followed, even from the Paris Agreement on aid, is that there had been no aid support that leads to sustainable development, right from the Berg report in the 80s. A country or a region, they have to do it themselves. People can help you through tough times, like COVID time, like, tsunamis and all that. But at the end of the day, a people must do it by themselves. Really, this is the point. So how do we redirect those investments? As we are coping with COVID, for example, countries need to reimagine their own infrastructures, especially health infrastructure. They have to reimagine their own industrial capacity to manufacture their own medicine. There was recently an AU meeting on vaccines making in Africa, and I was quite happy. It's been decided now that Africa will have its own Africa Medicine Agency, like the European Medicine Agency, which will remove a lot of the problems that we have certification all across Africa. And Africa CDC is doing a lot on that. So I think those are the kinds of responses that I believe now. And the African Development Bank is also supporting with the hubs. So the idea is that given the fragmented and small markets in Africa, there's going to be hubs, South Africa, North Africa, West Africa, say a country like Senegal, Nigeria, where you have specific medicines will be made from those areas instead of competing among ourselves for very small markets. So those are the sort of redirection and reimagination of what these kinds of support is able to do. There's a McKinsey report just a few days ago that also validates what we are saying. Say yes, the scope to manufacture vaccine in Africa is there. The market is going to increase to close to $5 billion in 2030. Because a lot of diseases today are still there. Malaria, diphtheria, typhoid, and all of those. And it's estimated that almost 10 million children get the first dose, but they can't get the second and third doses of, say, diphtheria. So the market for vaccine is there if we aggregate correctly, and if we work together as collective, as Africans. The market, I believe, is there, and the will and leadership should be harnessed to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for those answers. There's a question that relates to something that you just mentioned now, and it's about vaccine production. There was a question about the possible COVID TRIPS waiver that was proposed initially by South Africa and India. Do you think that this would make a significant difference to the production of vaccines in the African continent? That is question number one. I hope you got that one. It's about the COVID TRIPS waiver. Then the second question has to do with, I mean, the chat is full of questions, so we probably won't be able to go through all of them. But there's another question on patent regimes and the adverse effect that they often have on latecomer economies. So would you maybe comment on that? How can we balance the need to learn and to protect and the need to innovate and so on? So that is a second question. Let me go through some of the questions that you haven't that we haven't checked here. There's a question on absorptive capacity. So absorptive capacity is a challenge, and the person posing this question says that what would be your advice on how can African countries boost their absorptive capacity on frontier, particularly on frontier technologies? Let me stop with those three. We probably will have time for just one more round before we have to wrap up.
Right. Thank you. So the TRIPS waiver, I'm sure, I don't know whether you are monitoring the news, and the big news is that US and the Biden administration have now gotten behind the patent waiver for countries to be able to replicate the vaccine. You know, I mentioned, for example, what India did in the product patent protection in the 1970-71, actually. What many people don't realize is that there's a huge bank of expired patents, that many many of these Chinese and Indians actually, it's like mining them. You go and mine them. These patents, 20 years, they've expired. And I would like to point to that direction, for example. I think Africa needs to be smarter. We were one of the first to sign off the TRIP. But I'm sorry to say, many of the policymakers didn't even know what was in the TRIPS. Those other clever countries, they exploited the TRIPS because there's still a lot of provisions where you can actually get around the TRIPS. And I would like to say that, you know, we need to build that expertise, people who will do just those things. So the good news is that for COVID-19 especially, and for the South African one especially, we need to collaborate, help African countries to come together instead of competing among themselves. If a country, for example, has a particular innovation, let's do contracting and help them ramp up the market. You know, we were fighting, for example, for the Senegalese rapid antigen test in the bank. We supported them very strongly, you know, to be able to make those antigens. So my point about patent, yes, let's mine the expired patents. Let's take advantage of the current agreement. I'm sure it's going to still take months of negotiation on the COVID one. I'm sure the big farmers will fight, but we see a broad agreement. Over 60 countries have supported it already. The second issue is absorptive capacity. And this is where we talk about the vision, the long-term vision. You can only build, in fact, now, if, for example, suddenly you are able to make generics, where's the capacity? A few countries will take advantage of it. India, South Africa, Morocco, Algeria. We need to help other hubs in the African continent to be able to build them up. Fortunately, the migration from lab to market is shocking. It's not unlike those days when you are going to be spending years and years doing pilot before you move to the market. So, and we have the people. I think it will take people, people in diaspora, people on the continent, at the labs, to know exactly what each one can do so that we can aggregate them and support them to produce. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that set of answers. Okay, I think we probably will have time for one more round of questions. Are you okay with that?
No problem. No problem.
We will, unfortunately and inevitably, will have some questions unanswered, and I hope those posting the questions would forgive me for not being able to pose them due to time. So please, everybody, all the participants, be understanding of the time limits. I've picked up three questions, perhaps dealing with issues that we haven't touched on before. One has to do with, and you pointed out in one of your slides, the importance of scientific research and universities perhaps in contributing to building excellence, academic excellence that can help address some of these issues. So what would be your commentary on the role of universities to make them more responsive to local problems and perhaps contribute to this larger agenda of innovation-driven industrialization? A second question that has to do with gender, and I think we haven't touched on this issue, and it's quite an important one. COVID has also exposed the gender inequalities that exist in the continent, and that relates to employment, to economic opportunities, social impacts, and so on of different kinds. So I think it's an important question. The person posing the question highlights that the African Development Bank has pioneered an index to measure parity to help countries close the gender gap. So from your point of view, what role should we give to gender in this post-COVID, in this recovery sort of process, and bearing in mind the innovation and industrialization context that you are presenting to us? And a final question, and I think it's a good one to wrap up, perhaps, is related to your role in the African Development Bank, and to what extent is the African Development Bank supporting this view and this encouragement for boldness that you are presenting and to us in this seminar? Is the African Bank activities sort of leading to this direction that you are pointing us to?
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Erica. So on the universities, I mean, you know a lot. You've done a lot about all of this, all of you on this platform. I think the reimagination for me will be that we need to focus more on our local problems. I understand the mindset of university people. They want to compete with their peers globally. So a lot of the research is focused on other people's problems. We need to pivot to what is our issue. And we are trying actually to support local universities. For example, the president asked me and others to work on the ivermectin. There were groups, for example, that were working on ivermectin, and the bank is supporting them now for clinical trials. This is a very low-cost, cheap solution to COVID. So yes, I think what we need to do is to try to focus on our own local problems as much, and incentivize university lecturers to do that. I know there are a number of countries that are trying to do that. They give grants and all, but it has to be a very purposive, explicit goal. I mean, how come it has taken Oxford University to find solution to malaria vaccines after 50 years of independence? You know, how come, I'm not sure any African researcher is involved. The malaria vaccine has covered 77% effectiveness. You know, the WHO 79 or so. So, but I think we are close to it. I think we are also close to HIV, but this should have come from the continent of Africa. Second issue, extremely important, gender inequality. This is an unfinished assignment for us. And the bank, for example, and Dr. Addition in Paris is very, very strong on this. There's a program called AFAWA, Affirmative Action for Women in Business. We got $250 million from France. We got It's a program that is targeting about $3 billion to support women businesses. And if you, for those who are interested, you can go to the bank site to check it out. AFAWA, AFAWA in capital letter. Those are one of the gender-based support that the bank has been pushing. On the broader support for board leadership, I'm sure many of you were supporters of Dr. Adesina when he ran into trouble in 2020 with all these crazy allegations. What did he do? For example, all he was doing was pushing for African development, as he should. He is a champion for Africa. One of his sins, quote and unquote, was the fact that we were pushing for African cocoa to be processed in Africa. And it will interest you to know that through the African Investment Forum, Ghana got $600 million. Ghana Cocoa Board got $600 million to begin to do exactly that. And you can check on the web on internet. The Ghanaian president went to Switzerland in March this year and was bold to tell them that we are no more going to be exporting raw cocoa to you because of this support. And that incidentally, the support for this came from a number of European countries, actually. I think it's time for Africans to support each other. And the bank, and this is what I've been also, the reason why I was asked to come there was to push this agenda of industrialization and innovation. And I'm very happy to work with all of you for us to do this. You know, leadership has to come from everyone, not just the politicians, but the policymakers, the academics, so that we can begin to make a change that we want in this continent. Thank you.
That is a great way of concluding the round of questions and answers. I would like to really thank you so much, Prof. Oyinka, for not only a very insightful presentation, but I think the questions and answers have really helped us take the thinking much further. So really thank you so much. There have been excellent questions as well. I think if I have to think about my takeaway messages, what I take from your presentation is really you've emphasized the point that we have to make it ourselves. we cannot expect anybody else to do it for us. We have to take our future in our own hands, and we have to look inside our continent to do so. And we have to look inside ourselves, but also collaboratively, look into our partners in the continent to find solutions that make sense in the long run. We also need leaders that will help us take these bold steps that are needed towards building long-term capabilities. And also, you have called upon ourselves to recognize our role in the system as researchers and thinkers, not only to produce knowledge that will contribute to the larger agenda, but also to engage in our own environment with the policy makers around us, with the decision makers around us, to pass on these important messages to essentially realize the future that we want to be in, which is more resilient, more sustainable, more inclusive. So many thanks for an excellent presentation. Really, it's been a great opportunity to hear from you and to hear you and your important messages that we must remember in our daily work. And with that, I would like to pass it on to the Africa League Secretariat to perhaps give a last word of thanks. Thanks so much, Prof.
Thanks, Erica. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. I think you have summed everything well. Just to echo your comments, this was an excellent webinar where we can actually see from the type of comments and the discussions that we are having from the chat. And it's unfortunate we can't continue, but we want to appreciate you, Professor Baji, Erica, and KJ, and all the participants for your participation. I think the engagement was quite good. And we look forward to linking up again in the next webinar that is coming. So we appreciate very much, and I cannot say, thank you enough. Thank you so, so much, and have a good morning, evening, wherever you are. Thank you.